All right, I suppose that it is time. I want to respect all of your times this evening. So I want to welcome you to tonight's webinar, Teaching Care for the World, A Natural History of Environmental Education, featuring Nicole Freidenfelds, whom I will introduce more fully in a moment. So my name is Jessie Rack. I am the program director at the Natural History Institute here in Prescott, Arizona, where we are experiencing some thunder snow, which is very exciting. I first want to say a couple of words to introduce you to the Institute for those of you who are not familiar with our work. So the Natural History Institute is a mission-based, independent nonprofit based here in Prescott, Arizona. And our mission is to provide leadership and resources for a revitalized practice of natural history, integrating science, arts, and the humanities. And you can see my colleague just put our website in the chat. If you care, you can go look at it. So we believe that everyone can participate in the practice of natural history, and that by so doing, they can learn to care for the world and in return reap the mental and physical health benefits of nature. So quickly, I wanted to bring your attention to a couple of resources the Institute has to offer. One is our website there in the chat, which has all sorts of information, including upcoming events, upcoming programs, and all of our in-person talks we live stream as well as our webinars. So even if you're not local to Arizona, you can check them out. They're all saved on YouTube. And this conversation will also be saved on YouTube after it happens. So just FYI, our next upcoming program is happening on March 2nd, and that is the next installment of the Science and Communication webinar series. And it'll be featuring a conversation with Drs. Alejandro Rico-Guevara and Christina Hermy about the natural history of hummingbirds, specifically their research on hummingbirds using bills as weapons. I also wanted to say, if you are so inclined as to consider supporting the work of the NHI, like all small nonprofits, this is a labor of love, and your support is so important and necessary to us keeping the lights on. So if you're interested, on the homepage of that website, you can donate. If you're not interested, that's cool. We still have free content for you. So a couple of things about how we're going to work the logistics of tonight. Wow, Jenny is like working overtime in the chat there, dropping links for you. Some appreciation for Jenny Two-Tone, everyone. Couple of things about how we're going to work the logistics of the program tonight in terms of Zoom protocols. So thank you to everyone who is saying hi through the chat function and sharing where you're from. And I love that. As I mentioned a moment ago, we will be turning off the chat momentarily, just because we found it's a bit distracting if people are chatting back and forth during the program. So that'll be off. In its place, we'll be using the Q&A function, which is also at the bottom of the screen there. On the right side, you'll see a little icon that's like cartoon speech bubbles, and that will be on throughout the whole program. So if at any time you have a question for Nicole or a comment you'd like to make, we'll visit those. We're saving 10-ish minutes at the end to go check those out and answer those. Also, if you see someone has asked a question or made a comment that was along the lines of what you were going to say, instead of asking the same thing, there's a little thumbs up icon so you can like their comment, and then we'll see the ones that are most popular and try to ask those first. Finally, this program will be recorded and available on the Natural History Institute's YouTube channel, so please check them out. You'll get an email tomorrow with that link in an edited version where I'll just trim off the very beginning where folks are coming in. And feel free to share if you're so inspired. Again, if you're not, that's okay. So now, it is my great pleasure and honor to introduce our guest here tonight, Nicole Freidenfelds. So Nicole is a Visiting Assistant Extension Educator in the Department of Natural Resources and the Environment at the University of Connecticut. And so I like to refer to Nicole as a scientist turned educator turned scientist/educator, which is why I think she's just the most amazing person I could imagine to talk about this topic with tonight. And so she has a master's degree in natural resources with a focus on wildlife ecology from the University of New Hampshire, where she studied the effects of clear cutting on forest amphibians. She worked as a biological technician at the Cape Cod National Seashore and then a lab manager at several universities, so at Penn State, Rice, and UConn, doing kind of ecology, evolutionary biology research. And then in 2014, went back to school to get a whole teaching certification, after which she became a high school science teacher for several years. And now, so she's kind of done both sides, that's the scientist turned educator, and now we have the scientist/educator. Nicole now coordinates environmental education programs for youth, teachers, and adult volunteers through UConn's Natural Resource Conservation Academy. You'll see that link here in the chat as well. So with that, thank you so much, Nicole, for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me, Jessie. It's great to be here.
Oh my gosh, it's such a delight. So I'm so glad that you could make this happen. So I'm going to kind of start us off with, I have some kind of framing questions that I've been asking everyone that I've talked to here. And so here at the Natural History Institute, we have a very specific definition of natural history where we talk about it as a practice. And so the practice part is like considering that it's something we do and not just something that you only think about. It's like something you physically do. And so we consider natural history to be a practice of intentional focus, attentiveness, and receptivity to the more than human world, guided by honesty and accuracy, which is a little bit of a mouthful, but I would love to kind of hear, because I know it's different in different fields and from different backgrounds, how do you define natural history and where do you see it in your work?
I think I have maybe kind of a simple definition of natural history. And I don't know if it's good enough. It's not as fancy maybe as your definition.
Ours is just like very academic. I want to hear yours. Yeah.
I think of natural history as carefully observing organisms and the communities in which they exist.
Yeah.
Just as a very kind of simple definition. As it relates to my work, I see natural history like as a hook to get students sort of engaged and excited about the outdoors, because there's just really cool organisms that can really spark that curiosity and that interest.
Oh, that's cool. I like how you described it in describing it as a focus. Would you say focused observation? That is a practice, right? That's something you're doing. You're taking a lot of attention. I love that it's a hook. So you're like tricking students into liking nature. So they're being like, did you know there's something really weird out there? I mean, that's how I'm interpreting what you're saying, but that's really great. Thank you for sharing that. And so we heard a little bit in my introduction, you've worn many hats in your career. So I'd love to hear a little bit of your personal pathway to becoming a scientist, educator, scientist/educator, and just kind of, if it's not too much, like trace the path of you kind of falling in love with the world.
Okay. My story is probably similar to a lot of other folks in my position where, I had a very privileged upbringing, to grow up it was a fairly rural town in Eastern Connecticut. And I had a lot of outdoor space that I could access out my back door. And I just spent as much time as I could outside playing. There was a river that was, a little ways down the hill and through the woods. And, just getting to spend time, canoeing, fishing, swimming, just exploring the shoreline, during those really formative years, I think kind of set me on the path that I'm on. And I really connected, I think, with, just getting in the dirt and getting my hands, on critters that were approachable. I don't know, frogs, toads, turtles, snakes, things that you could get close to. That's what I was really drawn to as a kid. And I did do a lot of fishing with my dad and my grandfather growing up. So I think, that whole childhood side of it, I had, like, going through high school, I figured I was pretty interested in science and math. In college, I majored in biology and minored in chemistry, and just sort of got on the path of academia, because the friends I had in college were all going to grad school. And I was like, oh, is that a thing? I didn't really know, I was like, oh, maybe I'll look into that. I took a year off to work as a lab technician, because I wasn't quite ready to go to grad school at that time.
Always a good.
And I'm really glad
Always a
did
good
that.
if you're not sure.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah. And I got the experience I got on that job was just so critical to being successful in grad school. And I had some amazing mentors during that job that really helped me figure out like how to go about applying to grad school, and what should I be looking for. And I ended up at the University of New Hampshire working on a project that I was just super excited about, and studying frogs, like frogs in the forest. Does it get any better than that? And feeling like my research could have like real impact on sort of the management of the species, wood frogs. So that was just that was a really great time, I think, being in grad school and like making just the relationships and meeting folks there that were in kind of that same phase of their lives. I got very lucky I applied to, I can't remember now, but at one point I had kept track of the number of jobs I applied to when I was getting ready to finish grad school, and it was, I don't know, something like 75 or something like that.
Oh yeah, I had like a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Very disheartening.
Yes. And I ended up at the Cape Cod National Seashore, like you mentioned, just a temporary position as a biological technician, 6-month job. But again, just met like great people and got to work again with amphibians and reptiles, and just really enjoyed that outdoor research side of of field work and all the challenges that come with that. And through some connections with the job I had after college, I learned of a position that was available at Penn State University, managing a research lab there. So I up and moved to Pennsylvania and suddenly changed I stayed with reptiles, but switched to lizards and fire ants, and did a lot of work down in the South in Alabama and Arkansas. And I had an amazing boss there, Tracy Langkilde. She was just a phenomenal mentor and scientist. And, that job was I just learned so much, and I felt like I really grew as a scientist there. Life events happened, and I ended up leaving Penn State. I went to Rice, another great boss. I feel like I got very lucky. Different research, got to work on grass and bean beetles, which I didn't even know were a thing until I had that job.
Yeah.
So that was cool. And then came back to Connecticut and started a job at UConn. And then, like you mentioned, I was there for a couple of years in that position, and then decided, let's change things up a little bit and try teaching.
Can I interrupt you here? Because I sort of want to paraphrase the science side and then get into the pivot, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Yeah, no, I love,
yep.
Thank you for tracing that kind of story for us, because if I can paraphrase that, I loved it, because in your own words, kind of like catching critters was your hook into loving nature. So it worked for you. You were out catching critters and going fishing and getting your hands on things and getting dirty. And that made you want to eventually, fast forwarding, you found a way to have a job where you could catch critters, basically.
Basically, yeah.
That's amazing. I love that. And if that isn't kind of a plug for natural history as a thing, like that's great. Like we're creating people who care about nature by letting them get dirty and letting them catch frogs, maybe, right?
Right.
I don't know. That was maybe a dramatic paraphrase, but maybe a lot of my own influences on that, but
I think it's perfect. Yep.
oh my gosh, thank you. So you're signing off on it. Great. Let's like have kids catch frogs so they can do natural history.
Exactly.
So be conservationists. Great. So thank you for letting me jump in and just because I thought that was just a perfect little encapsulation. And so you've been a scientist, as you're about to tell us, you've also been an educator. You went and got a teaching certificate. And I'd love for you to kind of tell us about that experience as a high school teacher, which, you know, doing the important work there. And I'd love for you to kind of maybe think about how your science background influenced your work as an educator, because that's a very different angle than a lot of high school teachers come from, I think. So,
yes, I would say I started every day walking, you know, into the building, into my high school building with like this nervous energy of like, what's today going to be like? Because it's very unpredictable, which used to terrify me, but I ended up embracing that. I absolutely loved building relationships with my students. That was by far the best part of that job. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff about being a classroom teacher that they don't really tell you about. That's the less than glamorous side. But I think working with the students just makes it worth it. They were really just amazing young adults, and getting to watch them grow over the years. I had some students, 3 years in a row in different classes, and just getting to see them develop and grow was amazing.
Teaching biology, chemistry, I'm trying to remember.
Biology, chemistry, and environmental science.
And environmental science. Okay, yep. Cool. You did it all. Great. That's a lot.
I think there were some things that I brought to that position from my research background. And I feel like you might remember this. I had reached out, I had all of my students interview scientists as an assignment. And that was very challenging for a number of reasons, but they also went through the peer review process of, they wrote up reports on their interviews, and then they did anonymous reviews of 2 different classmates, and then had to incorporate the reviews into their final one. And, I think
that's very intense for high school. Let me also acknowledge that's a lot to teach them anonymous reviewing. That's cool.
It took a lot of organization. Yeah. And I hope that I know that some of them at least really got something out of that experience. Because it was teaching them all sorts of skills that I had learned in those research science positions, communication, organization, time management, things that I still use now, in my current job, that, those soft skills.
Transferable skills, I prefer.
Right. And I really was hoping to just, again, kind of ignite that curiosity and in my students. Yeah.
Cool. So your science background allowed you to kind of bring more, I guess, I don't want to say real science, but I want to say maybe real world science experiences to them. Would that be okay to say?
Yeah.
Just the experience of being peer reviewed is not one that I encountered until I was in graduate school,
Right.
And so you got them connected with real scientists, but practicing scientists, which is also very cool. So I love that brought a new dimension. And I know we have a space later to talk about curriculum, which is having been a scientist who has tried to do environmental education in a less formal way. I can't, it's so much more than my brain can kind of comprehend. And I know that's of course why you get this certification, because they teach you how to do that theoretically. But no, it's just amazing that you were able to kind of do both of those things. And so I would like to know, so you did scientist, practicing scientist, got a master's, did all the stuff, studied a lot of frogs, got to catch a lot of critters, and then you worked with high school students and taught high school. And then now you work for the Natural Resources Conservation Academy, which is a nonprofit, right? That's part of, no, not really. I'm not sure how
it's
underneath.
It's not a nonprofit. We're an extension,
okay,
I guess, organization, housed within the university.
got it.
Yeah.
But grant funded, right? I think that's why I got confused.
What was that?
Grant funded, though? I think that's what
It is. We have multiple avenues of funding. So we get grants. I don't want to say small, but small to large grants that really range from, community grants, some like within university grants, all the way up to like multi-million-dollar National Science Foundation grants.
Like, yeah, you do.
To run our programs.
That's so good. Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just want to also give a major shout out. We're some of our funding is from an anonymous donor. I don't even know who this person is, and they are the one who originally, over 10 years ago now, generously donated money to start the Natural Resources Conservation Academy, and then just recently made another very generous gift for us to keep our kind of flagship program
that's amazing.
Running. Yeah.
Yay, thank you to that person or people. Great. So now that I'm sorry that I wasn't sure where it came from, but can you kind of give us an intro to what is the Natural Resources Conservation Academy and how does it work? What is your position there? What's the whole kind of big picture of it?
Okay. Yep. So it is an extension. We're like an extension organization. So extension is a entity at most land grant universities throughout the country that work with the general public. So we provide environmental education programs, like you mentioned, for high school students, teachers, adult volunteers throughout Connecticut. It's a pretty small group as far as there's 2 full-time faculty who are like program coordinators essentially within the Natural Resources Conservation Academy, myself and Dr. Laura Cisneros, the director. But we work within this really large multidisciplinary team of colleagues from other departments. So within our Natural Resources and Environment Department, the Center for Land Use Education and Research, the NEAC School of Education, the Department of Digital Media and Design, and the Institute of the Environment. So it's like folks from all over who
big interdisciplinary team kind of.
Yeah, and they contribute to all of our different programs. And I guess I didn't mention this in your other question, but so a lot of these programs are grant funded. There is research that comes out of what we do. So it's like education research.
Cool. Okay.
So they're like, that's why, we work with folks in the School of Ed studying things like intergenerational learning. So the learning that happens between, say, teens and adults that work together on a project. There's research on science or STEM identity. So how participants in our programs identify as scientists, things like that.
Oh, cool. Yeah. That's great that you're kind of doing, not only are you doing work, but you're also getting research, like the kind of objective, like how is it working? Like, how's it going? Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Like what are the kind of, like we can measure the impacts of our programs. Yep.
Cool. Would you mind giving us a quick rundown of what are the programs? Like what is NRCA doing with the kids in the community?
Sure.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll
I guess, if you want to go that far.
So our currently running program right now that will be wrapping up on April 1st, which I can't believe, how quickly that's approaching.
You're joking. No, I'm just kidding.
That is our Conservation Ambassador program, and it's the longest running program that we've had. And it starts in the summer. A group of about 25 high school students from across the state come. They spend a week living at the UConn campus. Every day is a different theme. So there's a forestry day, a wildlife day, water, soils, GIS, and mapping. And it's just super hands-on. It's very outdoors. They're just exploring. They're in these new places. They're wearing waders, chest waders for the first time.
Love that.
And then there's other fun activities built in, like campfires and barbecue, and they go swimming in a lake and things like that. So that's 1 week. And then once they leave that part of the program, they go home, and we kind of guide and support them through carrying out a long-term environmental action project in their own community.
Oh, cool.
The current iteration of this program, because it's changed throughout the years, we now have UConn undergraduate students who work, in our office as near peer mentors to the high school students to really support them through these projects. And it's a really cool, I think, relationship to see how the high schoolers respond to the college students in a very different way than they respond to, sort of like me. And they really, I think they really look up to the college students. And so right now they're getting close to wrapping up their projects. They're creating professional posters. They're going to be presenting their projects at a STEM Youth Summit at the Connecticut Science Center on April 1st. So it's, really showcasing, all the effort that they put in over the last, 8 or so months. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. So you're getting kids out in the field and getting them real research experience, students, getting students real research experience and getting them matched up with scientists, basically. Yeah.
Well, it's more,
I
would say it can be that. So
okay.
Some of them do kind of research-based projects and are partnered with scientists. Sometimes, some of them partner and work with folks from the Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection.
Yeah, that's cool.
But some of the other students, their partners and their projects are more community focused. We had a student partner with a local community garden and folks from the USDA NRCS office to do a soil shop event at the garden where people could bring in soil samples and get them tested for lead. Just to see if it's safe, for them to grow their veggies, things like that. So it can the projects really range, and it depends on the students' interests. We don't assign them projects or anything like that. So it's based on their interest and if there's a need or issue that they've identified in their community.
Oh, that's cool that you're doing kind of real world issues in some cases. So that's awesome that you've been able to, and I love just the big picture of you've had these experiences working as a scientist and you've had these experiences as a teacher, and now you get to help coordinate this program that's literally doing those two things together, where you're kind of getting kids in the field and facilitating them doing hands-on research and if I may, seeing themselves as scientists, which I think is so important, and especially why there's such a huge attrition rate with women in STEM and, underrepresented folks, folks of color, in STEM fields, because they don't really get the opportunity to see themselves doing it. So I love that you're kind of providing that opportunity. That's awesome. And I guess I kind of want to ask the big picture questions. Can I go there? Can we get philosophical for a moment? Is that okay, Nicole?
Okay.
But I wrote this down and I'm wow, that's a really broad question. But let's start with could you define environmental education? I mean, I think it is what it sounds like. And why is it important? So we're just zooming all the way out. Why does it matter? Why should we do environmental education?
I almost feel oh, maybe I should have started with a definition. Um,
Oh no, we got there. We built it. We built it because we had environment, we had education. Now, what
Right.
does it mean when we put it together?
Right. I think there are probably a lot of different definitions for environmental education. One that I like a lot is meaningful outdoor experiences that bring us together to learn about our world.
Well, you really had a canned answer for that. I did not expect. I thought you were just gonna like say something. Wow. No, I love that. I love that. That's great. Yeah, I would have just been like, oh, it's like educating folks about the environment. Next question. No, I love that. I love that you made it meaningful outdoor experiences. And it educates folks about nature. So why is it important? Why do we need to do it?
Well,
From Arizona out here.
I think for a number of reasons, and maybe I'll build up to like what I think is sort of the most important reason, but just, increasing awareness and understanding of environmental issues and how those issues can impact not only individuals, communities, the planet. Being outdoors, they have shown, has improved physical and mental well-being. So there's that side of it, just feeling better. Building critical thinking skills, things like that. Self-efficacy, if it's an environmental action type of program where I don't want to keep saying students, but like learners of all ages are able to really contribute something, they feel good about themselves.
Yeah.
Environmentally responsible behavior and actions, finding solutions to environmental problems. But I think for me, how I think about it is that environmental education should inspire learners of all ages to value and take personal action to care for and sustain the world for future generations.
Nice. I like that. So it matters because that's how you teach people to care for the world, which is the title of this conversation today, right? Teaching care for the world.
If you can teach someone to care, I think that's one way to try to go about doing it. Yeah.
Well, I think you can. And I think, I think maybe, I don't know, my interpretation of everything you're saying is with science is like, maybe it starts by getting hands-on, and maybe it starts by experiences and like practicing natural history and like doing something about it and doing science and like asking a question yourself and getting out there and getting dirty and putting on your first pair of chest waders and catching a frog and then see how you feel, right? And like, it doesn't mean that it has to, science or nature or whatever has to be for everyone, but I think that is like a solid hook into helping people care for it, is like getting out in it and seeing how they're like part of it and not a separate kind of entity. I don't know.
Yes.
I told you we were getting philosophical. let's just get philosophical together for a minute, right? Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you for kind of like going through that. So it's important for helping folks care for the world. So what about environmental literacy? Is this different, and why does it matter?
I think of environmental literacy as like something that you gain through environmental education. You become more literate. And this is the one that I think I've been thinking more about recently after an event that I attended a couple weeks ago. And how important it is for us as a society to be environmentally literate in order to make informed choices about environmental issues. And
say it louder for the people in the back.
And really what I'm starting to realize is like those informed choices include the people that we vote into positions of power, who are then, our decision makers. And I know it's talked about in environmental education, but it's not commonly talked about as, as the way to really make change. A lot happens at that level of, legislature. And I don't think a lot of folks know that. My eyes are recently opened to this, and it's like, oh, wow, that took a long time for me to figure this out. Yeah.
And ensuring a broadly kind of environmentally literate public means you have a better chance of getting someone environmentally literate into the positions making those decisions also.
Right.
So yeah, no, that's a great point. So how about in schools, like for kids, why is environmental literacy, environmental education, like why is it essential to have that as part of your curriculum? Like, do you think, I guess?
I think if it's part of a formal, classroom curriculum, it helps strengthen that literacy in order to make those decisions. Because if we're relying simply on like these external environmental education programs that someone might happen upon at like a nature center or something like that, and we're not having it across the board as a sort of a required curriculum nationwide, then everyone's not getting the same information, and they're not all going to be able to make those same informed decisions. So I feel like it really does need to be part of the curriculum.
Yeah, fair. Cool. Well, thank you so much for addressing my kind of big picture philosophical journey there. So I do have a few more questions for you. I would love to know, I was trying to think of how to phrase this, but kind of how does your work in environmental education intersect with environmental justice and educational justice as well? I know these are big issues in environmental education right now, and as they should be. How does that intersect? How do we make science and nature kind of a welcome place for folks of all backgrounds and identities? Just solve that question for me.
Yeah. Here's the solution, right? Great question.
Thank you.
It really is it's a genuine systemic problem, and it's all connected. I can use Connecticut as an example here because that's where I am. So we have both historical and current policies, practices, programs that have resulted in Connecticut being one of the most segregated states in the country, which, yes, look at your face. You seem surprised by that.
I am surprised. Like the word segregated just like at all makes me make that face, but tell me more.
Yeah. So it's kind of, I'm no expert on this, but it's how the state is sort of divided into, it's a very small state and we have 169 towns. Many of
divides, kind of.
So many of which function as distinct, municipalities. Some have some combine into more regional school districts, but for the most part, a lot of them are individuals, districts. And our education system is based on, the funding for that often comes from like property taxes and things. Okay. So the education system does a better job of supporting academic performances of white students than those of Black students due to this enormous funding gap, like hundreds of millions of dollars between the like affluent districts and the basically all other districts. And those funding gaps, it's not a coincidence that they, the way that they fall out, where the districts that have the largest funding gaps are where there are also relatively higher rates of Black or Latinx students enrolled. And I actually was looking at some data the other day, and had two maps up side by side, and where these funding gaps occur are also where our state has identified environmental justice communities. So, I mean, it really just, everything is just completely connected. So yes, like the idea of like welcoming space, you know, a safe and inclusive outdoors. It's a great like idea. It's just like, it's going to take this collective mind shift and real change, like deliberate effort, I think, to make that happen. And you know, that's when it's like seems really overwhelming, and you know, oh, what can we do? When it's, you know, you feel like you're fighting an uphill battle sometimes. But I think that we can just start small changes, you know, can snowball and lead to larger changes. But just, you know, as an organization, you know, the Natural Resources Conservation Academy, you know, we've really taken a closer look at it, like a lot of our materials and our just the language that we use, and we're really trying to include more like culturally relevant and culturally sustaining approaches. Just thinking about the traditional view of environmentalism is kind of built on, oh, you mentioned this, did you mention this? I thought, oh yeah, the separation of humans from nature, right? How we're like not part of nature. And
it's a very like romantic and transcendentalist, like Emerson, Thoreau kind of view.
Yes, and kind of just pushing back on that, and really paying more attention to these more indigenous ways of knowing, and other people's histories that we've ignored, we've intentionally ignored for so long. So, you know, it's, I probably didn't answer the question, but really just trying to rethink the way that we've been doing things for so long, because it needs to change. Yeah.
No, that's great. I think you did a good job of answering that question. And I will ask a follow-up that why do you think programs like NRCA are, or like the one that NRCA coordinates, how are those going to help solve this problem? Or how might they? How could they?
I like to think of it almost on an individual scale, where, you know, the participants in our programs, you know, I like hope that they feel empowered with kind of the tools that we're providing for them, and this mentorship piece, that they're able to see folks like themselves in the environmental field, and you know, that they kind of go on beyond our programs to almost be that next generation of environmental stewards. Yeah.
I think it's, oh, sorry, did I cut you off?
No.
Yeah, no, I think it's so important to both like get students seeing representation in nature and science fields and the outdoors, and also experiencing it themselves and being given that message of like, you also can do this because you're doing it right now. You know, You're doing it and you're welcome. And like, this is for all of us. And just working to break down those boundaries of like, this is only for some people and not other people, which I think are false and not, they're antiquated, and we don't need those anymore. So, so I love the kind of immersion and like seeing and doing and like experience. And that's how you kind of can hopefully theoretically overcome those things. So thank you. Well, I kind of want to pivot a little bit back to the teaching and curriculum question too. And I want to remind those of you watching feel free to put questions in the Q&A down there at the bottom, and I will get to those in like 5-ish minutes. So feel free to be throwing questions in there, and we'll tackle those here in a couple minutes. Okay, so kind of thinking back about classroom teachers, I was thinking more about the things you're saying. And I know, so I used to work for an environmental ed program in Tucson, actually, which I know Julie Strom and some other folks on here, where I was like the external educator who'd come into a classroom for, an hour a week and be like, whoa, hey, I'm here to build a flower on my head or whatever, like do something fun and engaging. And I know there's a lot of push in the environmental ed community to be like, teachers, do more. Well, for everywhere, teachers, but do more environmental education, but also teachers are getting it from everywhere. Just like, do more of this, do more of this, do more of that. This is a long question. I know it's hard to fit all that in as a teacher. And so it can be really hard to provide environmental ed opportunities to students. Do you have suggestions for educators trying to navigate this? Like, what do you do if you're a teacher and everyone's like, do more EE and you want to, but everything's limited and hard?
That's a good question. And it's also like, it can be so hard just to fit new stuff in to your curriculum, especially if you have to reach specific standards or that sort of thing. So one suggestion is to just invite folks like you used to be in your to come, that is one thing that you can do. You can have an outside environmental educator come in to the classroom, either like in person or virtually.
How do you find those people? That's my follow-up question. I'm going to interrupt real quick.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And most states have so there's a national organization of environmental educators, and most states have like an affiliate of that national organization. And oftentimes that affiliate organization in Connecticut is the Connecticut Outdoor and Environmental Education Association. I
believe the link for that is in the chat. Sorry. Yeah.
They can act as a resource in some states to connect, classroom teachers with environmental educators. I know that in the South, I'm going to mess up their acronym. They have like a collective organization, like each state has their own, but then they have one for the Southeast. It's like, Georgia and South Carolina and a bunch of other states. And they have this really great network down there to really connect people together. But yeah, so that's one way to kind of figure out who to invite into your classroom.
I'm putting the Arizona link in the chat for those of you who are locals. So it's Arizona Association for Environmental Education, and Connecticut is there also. Okay, great. So we can invite an outside person. What else can we do?
Okay, so I suspect that some teachers might already kind of be doing environmental education, but might not realize it yet. Or it could be easier for them to incorporate into their curriculum than they think. So I just met, actually at the conference, I was at a conference in Tucson in October.
The National Education for Environmental Education.
And I met, in fact, a gentleman from Connecticut who was a former history, social studies teacher, who, and he really opened my eyes to the idea of like including environmental education as curriculum in a social studies class, as far as like civic engagement and, how it ties into political and, legal issues and things like that. And I was like, wow, yeah, you're right. Like like, how did I not think of this before?
For that matter, you could put it into English classes too, and like read those dudes I mentioned a minute ago, but also all of this like vast volume of like conservation literature and like nature writing and stuff, and inspire discussions that way too.
Yes, and like, so nature literature and sure, some of the more historical authors, great, but then some, introduce your students to some of the diverse authors that have existed, that we, need to draw more attention to.
Which sidebar, I actually am teaching a nature writing class at this current moment in time. So there's a couple of books like this one, Colors of Nature, is a great one. It's Culture, Identity in the Natural World. And also Milkweed Editions just came out with a brand new, like I just got in the mail yesterday, anthology of nature writing from Black folks. And I think it's called A Darker Wilderness. So anyway, yeah. So lots of things. There's lots more things happening and more availability.
I think a young adult version of Braiding Sweetgrass recently came out, which I read the regular adult version.
Me too. Yeah.
But I would like to read the young adult version.
Yeah.
But yes, and then even like something, in a math class, students could do calculations or statistical analyses on like plastic pollution or water quality or some climate change variable, pick one. There's a lot. So it's like, it really can get, I think, incorporated into curriculum easier than maybe you think. Yeah.
And I think also when I was when I was transitioning from being a scientist to doing more environmental education, I did a couple of trainings. So I did Project Learning Tree. If you haven't heard of that, is a great like kind of national curriculum, and it deals mostly with like forests and forest ecology and forest stuff. And then also Project Wild is more like wildlife stuff. And I really like both of those, and they're really useful as I kind of learned how to structure a lesson plan and how to do things like that. Also, I was going to say, I'm not sure if Connecticut, I don't know how you say your acronym, Connecticut Environmentalist, is COEA?
COEA, yep.
Oh, okay. COEA has this yet. Many of the state environmental ed organizations offer a certification program. And so Arizona has ours. And so you can actually, as an educator, as anyone, you can get a certification and you kind of learn all of that structured stuff of like, how do you deploy it? What are all the ways? So maybe look into your local state EE organization.
Connecticut, I don't think offers that right now, but I think you might be able to get it through the national organization.
Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. I see a couple of questions. I have one more for you, Nicole, before we turn to the questions in the Q&A. So this is kind of my closer question, because I asked you at the beginning to define natural history and like talk about, and you said it was a hook, which I love. So as a scientist who is now working for a Natural History Institute, who's like all about natural history, I know that natural history is often looked down on science. Like they see it's just very simplistic and maybe just like old school science, but I see it very much alive in environmental education in some of the ways you described. And I'd love for you to take a moment and maybe speak to the importance of natural history study for students and younger folks. And everyone, for learners of all ages, which is the phrase you've been using, which I'm going to use now.
I'll reiterate like what I said at the beginning, that I do see it as this hook to really get learners, interested. And I don't have the author's name. I feel bad off the top of my head, but I stumbled upon a paper recently that was pretty cool, and also, again, got me thinking about sort of the history of natural history and how it has, similar history to the environmental movement, that, we can start rewriting some of that history or changing it going forward.
And that's like not traditionally excluded, folks excluded from the narrative, is what you're saying. Yeah,
exactly. Yes.
Cool. Let's bring them back.
And I'm not saying that to steer us away from natural history, but what I loved in this paper is that, and I think they coined this term, the next generation natural history.
Well, you just send this to me if you find it. Sorry.
It's embracing basically the technological and analytical advances that have taken place in the last, however many recent years, as a new, like more powerful way to practice natural history, where we can observe these organisms in like less invasive ways using, so like wildlife cameras, drones, acoustic monitors, where it's like, you just put this box out in the forest and it records sounds, like, and it's, you're not really affecting the animal's behavior by being there.
eDNA.
Yes, right. Like even just like remote sensing and things like that, where it's, I think that can also engage young folks in the practice of natural history, getting to use this really cool technology to study and learn important things about organisms and the communities and habitats that they live in. So it's like natural history 2.0 or something.
I love that your pieces of advice for engaging in natural history are let them catch critters and let the children use technology. So let's address this to Gen Z now. No, I love that. So there's like two avenues almost. So if someone's less inclined to physically be out there getting dirty and catching frogs, maybe what you're into is designing a new program to like monitor populations of wildlife, which I have a friend who does that, or like stuff
because
like
not everyone wants to, stick their hands in the mud, like, and not everybody needs to do that, save the mud for me. And they can do the computer fancy analysis stuff. Yeah.
Love that. Thanks, Nicole. I'm going to turn it to the Q&A, so feel free to get your questions in there. Julie Strom is just supporting us. She loves the how to empower educators to incorporate EE into the curriculum question. She spent a lot of time demonstrating to teachers how many standards can be addressed simultaneously through EE. EE is by nature multidisciplinary. 100%. Yeah. When I worked in Tucson also, we tried to align it with all of these different subjects, because you can put it into all these different things. And that's really great. Thanks, Julie. Okay, great job, Nicole. Along with what you're talking about, how can we create more cross-disciplinary partnerships to help facilitate more civic engagement or community-based environmental action? That's a great question.
Yeah, that is a great question. Within our organization, I think one of the things that we've learned and have sort of changed our approach is really spending time to build relationships with like specific communities and organizations, and just getting to know the folks there and kind of building that network, building trust, to really establish those relationships. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much. Another question from Cheryl Wheeler, who wants to know, for people who want to get into environmental education, who already have a background in environmental studies, but not on the job experience, what do you recommend?
Oh, that's a great question. Geez. I feel like, because I came at it at such a, like, I feel like this position just, again, I got lucky with this, and I didn't, my training is not as an environmental educator. Like
I'm sorry, excuse me. You have a literal certificate in teaching and you have a master's in science. I think you're exactly what an environmental educator is, but what if we don't have those two things? How would you get teaching experience, do you think?
I guess just, I don't know. I mean, I know that there's like more kind of seasonal temporary positions that that are always looking for educators. I feel like that could be a first step.
I think maybe connecting with like your volunteer. Yeah, Julie says volunteer.
Yeah, I was thinking, I was going to say volunteer, but then I always feel like bad.
So look for your local parks, or look for, there's often, if you look at your local state's environmental ed organization, someone said professional development from NAAW, which is the North American Association for Environmental Ed. So you can do some professional development. You can take a environmental ed certification course from your local chapter. You could volunteer. You could even, if you have a strong science background, maybe if you know any teachers, if you know people who know teachers, maybe reach out and be like, hey, is there any way I could help in your classroom, or just like do a presentation. I'm thinking things like that. Look around for opportunities. NAAA also has a great like job board.
Oh, I was just going to say that. They have a great job board. Yep.
Yeah. Which I think they just changed as like jobs.naaw.org or something like that. So so these are great. These are all great opportunities and a great question. So volunteering is a good way to get started, get your experience doing stuff with connect with local nonprofits, local environmental nonprofits. Often will need, speaking from someone who works for a nonprofit, we have more big ideas than we have money or people to do them. So like, we'd love it if you were like, hey, I want to help out. So yeah, that's great. Any final questions from our viewers this evening? I'll give you 1 second. And in the meantime, while they're thinking, Nicole, is there anything I forgot to ask that you want to say, or you'd like to kind of put a final exclamation point on?
There used to be this quote that from one of our previous programs that someone had said that I loved. You're never too old to learn, and you're never too young to teach.
Oh, I love that. I love that it has the teaching part too. That's awesome. Thank you for saying that.
And I think kids can teach us a lot.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, with that, thank you everyone for joining us on this Valentine's evening during a snowstorm. We so appreciate it. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this whole conversation in edited form will be available on our YouTube tomorrow afternoon after I have time to edit the beginning out. And so you can share, you'll get an email for attending. So thank you so much, Nicole, for joining us. This has been a delight, and you are wonderful, and keep up the good work. So
thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And good night, everyone.